I have been slacking a bit on card reviews, so we've got a lot to get through, starting with the Relic package for Demon Hunter. So there are going to be 3 relics that are all like kind of mediocre, but they each improve your future relics. There's a location card that improves your future relics, and a big minion that's the payoff for the archetype. So starting out, we have Relic of Extinction, 2 mana, deal 1 damage to a random enemy minion twice, improve your future relics. So without being improved at all at the baseline, this is arcane missiles that shoots 1 less missile and costs twice as much mana. So when this card's not upgraded, it's terrible. But even when you upgrade it once, it's 2 mana, deal 2 to 2 random minions. That's still just a worse spell barrage, right? Because you don't have as much influence over where it goes. So you really need this card to be upgraded twice before it actually starts to look good. Which is a pretty tall task, I would say, especially considering this is your cheapest relic. It's the one you often want to be playing first. And it's often going to be very mediocre, I think. Next up, we have Relic of Phantasms. 3 mana, summon 2 1/1 spirits. Improve your future relics. So the way this is improved is it upgrades the stats of the minions. You always summon 2, but it'll be a 2/2, and then a 3/3, and then a 4/4. Generally, when things improve, the stat that improves is a number, rather than like where it says summon 2, the word 2 is spelled out as a word. So anyway, at the baseline, 3 mana summon 2 1/1s, awful. Awful card. 3 mana summon 2 2/2s is still pretty bad. Landscaping was not a great card. And then after 2 improvements, it gets to be 3 mana summon 2 3/3s, which is not even that good, but it's kinda good. So you need this to be upgraded twice before it's like at all worth playing. And considering that you're probably curving this after the bad arcane missiles on turn 2, that seems like a pretty weak curve. Next up, we have Relic of Dimensions. 5 mana to draw 2 cards and reduce their cost by 1. Improve your future relics. So when this is improved, it will increase the discount that you get on the cards, not the number of cards drawn. So 5 mana, draw 2, reduce their cost by 1. Again, for the relics, this is pretty mediocre at the baseline. Compare it to Skull of Gul'dan or compare it to Need for Greed. It looks a bit weak. But compared to the other ones, I think with just 1 upgrade, this starts to look pretty good. And past that, it definitely just looks pretty insane, getting a lot of discounts. I definitely think this is the strongest of the relic cards, but in order to play it, you do have to play the previous relics, which look pretty weak. And even though this is the strongest of them, it's still not really that insane. Next up, we have Demon Hunter's Location, Relic Vault. 3 mana, 2 durability. The next relic you play this turn casts twice. So the notable thing about this is if your relic casts twice, then it will upgrade your future relics twice. Which, since all of the relics are pretty bad at their baseline, you definitely want to be upgrading them more. And I assume when you cast a relic twice, the second one is upgraded by the first one. So if you play your Relic Vault on 3, and then on turn 4 you play your Relic of Phantasms, then you can make 2 1/1s and then 2 2/2s, and you've also upgraded everything in the future twice. And I guess potentially you've played your Relic of Extinction before that, so you're going to make, on turn 4, 2 2/2s and then 2 3/3s. Which is kind of a lot of stats, but even in that scenario, you've invested 8 mana, 3 cards, and it still hasn't really looked that impressive. So I'm pretty worried about the playability of this Relic package. Seems like it just takes a bit too much time to get it all online. But if the Relic package is good, I think it's pretty much entirely on the back of Relic Vault. I think this card will easily be the highest win rate card in the deck, because all the deck cares about is upgrading your relics, and this is the card that does it the best. And finally, we have a Demon Hunter Legendary, Artificer Xy'mox. 8 mana 8/8 with Battlecry, discover and cast a relic. Infuse 5, cast all 3 instead. So notably, there are only 3 relics, so when you're discovering among them, you get to choose whichever one you want. And if all of your stuff is big and upgraded, then you have the opportunity to get, say, like 2 6/6s to go along with your 8/8, or you can draw 2 cards that cost 0 mana basically, or you can kill 2 of your opponent's big minions. So this card is pretty strong, I would say, especially since when it's infused 5 times, you can get all of those effects. You make a bigger board for yourself, kill your opponent's board, and draw cards. That is quite powerful, I would say. And also because of the Relic of Phantasms, that is a pretty easy way to infuse this, because you want to be playing the Relic anyway, it makes things, the things die, you infuse the Xy'mox. So obviously this card is pretty strong, it's just a matter of can you play all the other Relic stuff to support it? I'm not really confident that you can. I think the early game of the Relic package is going to be super, super weak, and I don't know that Demon Hunter can really afford to just let that happen. But even as a payoff card, I think this card has some competition. Like, as an 8-mana finisher, maybe Jace is just a better card than this, even if you've, like, been playing Relics throughout the game. Or compare it to, like, Illidari Inquisitor. Maybe just hitting your opponent for 8 is better, because this card doesn't actually do any damage. So, like, you can make a big board presence, you can draw cards, but, like, Jace and Inquisitor can just kill the opponent. And the Relic package does take up 9 deck slots. I think you probably do have to max out on 2 copies of everything, plus the Legendary. So, like, are you able to fit that in, like, a Death Rattle Demon Hunter, or an Aggro Demon Hunter, or, like, what deck are you actually fitting this in? Is it its own deck, I guess? I don't know. I'm just pretty underwhelmed by all this stuff, I think. I think the Legendary and the location are both pretty good, it's just the Relics themselves all seem quite mediocre. Moving on to a Hunter card, we have the Stonebound Gargon. 4-mana 3/5 beast with Rush, and Infuse 3 also damages the minions next to whomever this attacks. I mean, Rush plus Cleave is a pretty good pair of keywords, and infusing 3 times as a Hunter before turn 4 is probably not that hard. But I'm just a little bit worried that this, like, doesn't do enough damage. How often on turn 4 as a Hunter, especially a Hunter that's been playing minions in the early turn, how often does your opponent have, like, 3 things that you want to rush into that would all die to 3 damage? I'm a little bit skeptical of that. This card also doesn't really seem to fit in an existing Hunter deck. Like, I don't think Big Beast Hunter wants this conflicting with their Sunken Sabers. I don't think Face Hunter or Quest Hunter are really interested in this card. So it seems like it would have to be a new deck for this card, but it seems like Big Beast Hunter does this style of deck better than what this is trying to do. So I'm a bit underwhelmed by this at the moment. There is the new Hunter location that gives a beast +2 attack and rush. I think maybe it would have been interesting if this card had Cleave by default and then the Infuse gave it rush. So then you could, like, if it's not infused, you could pair it with the location to kind of get the effect out of it. But maybe in that scenario, you're happy just giving this +2 attack so it cleaves for 5. And you can also play it in a deck with, like, Doggy Biscuit and Ramming Mount, that kind of stuff. Get some really fat cleaves. But I don't know what the home for this card looks like. Convincing Disguise for Shaman. A 1-mana spell that says transform a friendly minion into one that costs 2 more. Infuse 4, transform all friendly minions instead. So if you can infuse this 4 times, it's evolve twice for the same amount of mana as a single evolve, which seems pretty powerful. But I will say that in general, I think evolving twice is not worth twice as much as evolving once. Because generally when you're evolving, it's something like a Desert Hare that's very understated for its mana cost. So the jump from 3 to 4 is much bigger, or the jump from a 1/1 up to a 4-cost minion is much bigger than the jump from a 4-cost minion up to a 5-cost minion. So I think, like, at a glance, maybe this card looks really insane, when in practice, I don't think it's really that much different from Evolve. It might actually be worse than Evolve, because you have to infuse it, and Infuse 4 is kind of a lot. Of course, if you're playing an Evolve Shaman, you're playing things like Desert Hare, that is, you know, a lot of tokens and stuff that can die to infuse this, and Shaman has, like, totems that can also die. They have piranhas from schooling that they can use, so it's probably not that hard to infuse with this, but you still do have to put the effort into infusing with it. At its baseline, when it's not infused, you transform a single friendly minion into one that costs 2 more. I mean, that's, like, kind of fine, It's good if you can hit like a Goldshire Knoll or something that's really big. But in general, I think you really, really want to infuse this card. And if you infuse it, I think it's basically Evolve. It's just Evolve with some extra steps. We have seen some Evolve cards previously in the set, the Location and the Legendary. The Legendary, when you try to evolve it, it just summons a new copy or a new thing, and the 3/6 stays in play. So that's really good with this card. But yeah, I mean, basically, if you're playing an Evolve deck, you obviously play this card. I think it's about as good as Evolve. Red Herring, a neutral minion. 7 mana, 3/12 beast with taunt. Your non-Red Herring minions have stealth. It's kind of hard to imagine that you would ever put this in your deck for the sake of just playing it on turn 7. Because if you're just playing it on turn 7, then all the stuff that you're giving stealth to has already been in play, and your opponent has already had a chance to deal with it. And also, once you're getting up to this mana cost, you give everything stealth, and then it dies to Whirlpool, Twisting Nether. Even, like, all of your board other than the Red Herring could die to Spammy Arcanist. There's a lot of ways to just kind of invalidate this effect on turn 7. And on top of that, I don't even really know what you're trying to protect. I can't really think of a specific minion that you want to give stealth to for such an expensive cost. Like in the past, people gave Gadgetzan Auctioneer stealth, but I mean, when that costs 13 mana, that's not nearly as good. So I can't really imagine people wanting to put this card in their deck. But if they do, it's going to be trying to like cheat it out with Sunken Saber, or I'm sure there's some other way to cheat it out. Or I can go for the generic big minion cop-out and say that maybe Druid would play this card. But ultimately, I think this is probably just going to be a pack filler card, but a pretty interesting, pretty fun one. Solid Alibi for Mage. 2 mana Frost spell. Until your next turn, your hero can only take 1 damage at a time. So a pretty solid defensive card. Even if your opponent has a full board, you're still only going to take 7 damage, which 7 is kind of a lot, but if they have 7 minions, it's not that much. It's sort of like an ice block, but a little bit easier to play around and a little bit more telegraphed. I'm just not really sure what deck would want to play this card. Like, obviously Big Spell Mage isn't going to play a 2 mana spell, and Mech Mage wouldn't be interested in this. I don't think like an aggressive Secret Mage type deck would be interested in this. But maybe Skeleton Mage would play this? That deck definitely wants to spend a lot of time getting to the late game and making skeletons so they can play their big Kel'Thuzad. But when you're making all those skeletons, you're probably pretty good at board control. I don't know if you're super interested in this sort of effect. Maybe you just play this in Quest Mage? Maybe there could be a revival of Quest Mage with this card. It's a nice, cheap, always playable Frost spell, which is something that deck has sometimes struggled with. And the defensive ability of this card is pretty useful in that deck. But I don't think Quest Mage is really that close to being playable at the moment. And I don't know if this card is going to bring it back. It's definitely an interesting card, definitely a dangerous card. But I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't immediately see any play. Huntsman Altimor, a Hunter Legendary. 7 mana 5/4 with Battlecry, summon a Gargon Companion, infuse 4, summon another, infuse 8, summon another. And these Gargon Companions, I believe, are just animal companions. So you've got Misha, Leok, and Huffer. I personally think it's kind of annoying that it doesn't just say animal companion, but whatever. So anyway, 7 mana 5/4 that summons an animal companion is actually like kind of fine. It's not that bad. And then if you summon 2 animal companions, then this looks pretty solid. And if you summon 3, I mean, that's 7 mana for Call the Wild, which was a good card on its own, and this is just cheaper and gives you a 5/4 on top of it. So pretty solid card, I would say. Also keep in mind when you're getting Leok and Huffer, this just also does 5 damage. So 7 mana for a board that does 5 damage, and if you have any just like random 1/1s in play, then this also pushes 1 damage for each of those with Leok. So I think this card is just simply pretty good. And I think Hunter does a pretty good job of infusing it, particularly with Hydrolodon, but they have all kinds of other stuff in their deck that can summon minions, and there's some new stuff that's pretty good at summoning minions as well. So yeah, I mean, I think this card's just pretty good. I think at the moment you would probably just slot it into Big Beast Hunter. And if there's a new Hunter deck, a new like Infuse Hunter, then you obviously just play this card in that deck as well. Just a very solid card. Demolition Renovator. 4 mana 4/4 with Battlecry, destroy an enemy location. So we have seen all of the location cards so far. I don't think any of them are really jumping out to me as needing to be destroyed. Maybe Hedge Mage is setting up for a combo. Maybe Sinstone Graveyard is setting up for a combo. But I don't think any of them have really convinced me that I need to play a 4 mana 4/4 in my deck. So I don't expect this card to be good, but it's nice to just have this card existing if something gets out of hand, I guess. Dispossessed Soul. 4 mana 4/5 with Battlecry. If you control a location, discover a copy of a card in your deck. Well, Chillwind Yeti that draws a card is pretty good, and being able to discover the card in your deck is even better. This is also a copy of a card in your deck, so you can set up to have like 2 of a legendary or 3 copies of a normal card. But I think it's pretty inconsistent. You're only going to be able to play 2 locations in your deck. I don't think we've seen anything so far that tutors a location. So this is going to be dead pretty often. I do think most of the locations you are probably keeping off the mulligan, so that makes this card look a little bit better. And one good thing about the locations is, well, not a good thing, but one thing about them is that they're really slow because they have the 1-turn cooldown between activating their effects. So they are going to be in play for a while once you draw them. So even if you play your location on turn 3 and then draw this on like turn 7, it's probably still going to be active. But I think having to control a location is probably going to be too much of a conditional for this card. But there are 10 classes that could at least try to play it. Pelagos, a priest legendary minion. 3 mana 1/6. After you cast a spell on a friendly minion, set its attack and health to the higher of the 2. So the most notable spell this would work with would be Serpent Wig. And you could simply cast the Serpent Wig on Pelagos, which would make it a 4 mana 8/8, which is pretty impressive. This card is also good when you're targeting a Treasure Guard or a Vicious Slither Spear. So I think this card just very casually slots into Naga Priest without having to think too much about it. I don't think like Quest Priest or Control Priest would really be able to use this card, but it seems like it's found a home without those. I don't know if there's any way to get a mass use out of this card. Something like a Gift of the Naru doesn't work because you're not casting the spell on the minion. But I guess Serpent Wigs are cheap and repeatable enough that you can kind of get a mass use out of them. So yeah, this card is pretty good in Naga Priest, I would say. Boon of the Ascended, 4 mana priest spell, a holy spell. Give a minion +2 health. Summon a Kyrian with its stats and taunt. And I assume, yeah, it's just a taunt minion. This card seems like pretty mediocre to me. You need to have a minion to target, and all you're really getting is a pile of stats out of it. I mean, like, if you're playing this on curve, what 3-drop are you targeting that is good as a 4-drop when you just give it +2 health? I can't really think of much. And you're not actually copying, like, the text on the card in any way, so it's kind of hard to imagine this being a combo card. It's probably too expensive for something like Naga Priest. Maybe it's fine in Silence Priest. You target like a Humongous Razor Leaf and you get a 4 mana 4/10 taunt. But I think you would rather just play a Silence on that 4/8. Especially since there's a 4 mana Silence that also copies it, right? So I don't really know what the point of this card is. I guess it's sick with Pelagos, but I don't think Pelagos needs this. Next we have a rogue legendary, Necrolord Draka. 4 mana 3/4 with Battlecry. Equip a 1/3 dagger, +1 attack for each other card you played this turn. So rogue of course has their preps and their backstabs and all that kind of stuff. So they could potentially make a pretty big weapon with this. But I don't know if I'm a big fan. It does cost 4 mana. So playing other cards in the same turn is going to be some work. I mean, we have seen from, like, Edwin that you can play a 4 mana card and a bunch of cards in a turn. But Edwin actually draws those cards, which makes it a bit easier to go spammy with it. And I think if your goal is just to make a big a big weapon, can't you just play Swordfish? I mean, obviously this has a higher ceiling than Swordfish, but Swordfish already does a ton of damage. So I don't know if you really need this card, and it's like, it's just a lot of work to activate. The payoff to me doesn't really seem that high. But it does work pretty well with the location card that also wants you to spam a bunch of cards to make a big stealth minion. So like, maybe it's just something you can also play on the same turn that you're going for that. But I think it's kind of mediocre. Just seems like a lot of work to get such a big weapon. The Stonewright, a Shaman legendary. 4 mana 5/4, Battle Cry. For the rest of the game, your totems have +2 attack. So I love Shaman. I love totems. I think this card sucks. Shaman just doesn't have enough totem stuff for me to care about playing this card. There is a new totem shaman, or new shaman totem, that we're probably not going to get to in this video, that is pretty good with this. But that's like pretty much the only thing. You have to invest 4 mana into playing this card. It's just so mediocre. And like, after you play this card, you're still not really that happy using your hero power. I mean, you make a 2/2 with your hero power, like sure, that's fine. But that's not better than like developing minions from your hand. I just think there's not enough totem stuff currently for me to care about this card. And the totem deck is probably absolute garbage if you don't draw the Stonewright, which is a 1-of in your deck, and I don't think there's an obvious way that you can tutor it. So I don't think this looks great. But hey, if this means there's going to be a bunch of totems in the set, then eventually this could be really good, and I would be pretty happy with that. Sinfueled Golem, 7 mana 2/2. Infuse 3, gain stats equal to the attack of the minions that infused this. Gain stats equal to the attack of the minions that infused this. So if you have 3 Magma Ragers that died, they have 5 attack, so that's 15 attack from those. So this would gain 15 attack and 15 health, I believe, if I'm understanding this correctly. But with that said, I think this card is probably pretty terrible. It's just 7 mana for a pile of stats, which is not good because your opponent can just play Shadow Word Death. And it doesn't like gradually grow. You have to have 3 things die before it does anything. And if it's not infused for those 3 times, then it's a 7 mana 2/2. So unless there's like some really specific degenerate combo you can do with this card, this seems completely unplayable to me. Even if it was just like a 7 mana 12/12. Like, I'm not at all convinced that that would be a decent card. But it does have potential to be really, really big if you're playing like Naga Giants and stuff with it. I just can't see a world where this is ever worth putting in my deck. This is like one of those cards that to me, it looks so bad that I feel like I have to be missing something. It's like, there's no way that they would actually make a card this bad. So it's like making me uncomfortable saying that it's bad, but I'm pretty sure it's bad.